I want to share how a defective saddle on my horse gave me proof God exists. And I just completed this video on what happens to be my 65th birthday today. My name is Vivian Gendernalic, and I can see God timed this to be a synchronistic event I share on a hallmark of my turning 65 today. It wasn't planned, believe me. I had planned to complete this past Saturday, but the way things turned around, it was more involved and complicated to tell it, and it is a well-deserved story for me to have put all this effort into it because it gives proof that God exists. This is one of the several experiences I've had. This particular one it's not a long one, but it's powerful and it's amazing. I mean, to this day, I absolutely cannot explain. I cannot account for a crucial chunk of time that happened. And so let me share with you this particular experience. I was 16 years of age. And as many teens, especially young girls, I had an obsession and a love for horses. I loved horses, anything to do with horses. I had wanted to have a horse of my own, and anything. When I was a young child, anywhere where there was a pony ride, I'd have my mother take me to so I could ride the pony. And I lived at a time when some people would bring their horses around down our block, and they would let children ride on the horses. This is Miami, Florida now. Miami, Florida. It would come down the blocks where I grew up in. They're suburban blocks. It was a time when even the milk truck would come and bring milk to the doors, okay, and in the cities. You know, those things here in Miami don't exist anymore. That's long ago. But anyways, so I was always wanting to do anything to do with horses. And that's about as close as I got to get. And when I was 16, I had learned that there was a summer camp that was run by a Christian organization. I think their name is Circle C. Now, I had nothing to do with that. I think it was a denomination that they ran a summer camp for their the congregants' children, but it was open to the public. And I wasn't part of that denomination. I had shared where I had grown up as a Catholic. And however, I had seen that they had horse rides. That was part of this camp called Circle C. And actually, I was on the older side for the kids that would go there, but they did have children my age, 16, I believe even 17. So I had convinced my parents to let me go there. I believe it was just for 1 or 2 weeks, but they offered, as part of the camp, they offered horse rides and hay rides. And I had not had anything like that, but I was really going to be able to ride the horses. And even though I had to put up with, and I say put up with, this was like a traditional Christian camp. I had not experienced this before, where they would have, part of the camp would be, they would have Bible study time. Well, we didn't have that going on in the Catholic Church when I was there. When I was 16, I was no longer attending Catholic Church. I had been about a couple years in public school. I had just gone to elementary school as for Catholic, because my mother had sent all of us to this private Catholic school for our elementary school studies. So here I had been attending public school at the time. And so I put up with the Bible study time in order so I could have the opportunity to get a chance to ride the horses. They had a barn, and it had several horses in it, and there was a time where they would allow us to ride a horse. Well, the horse that I had wanted to ride, he was wild. He was a trouble. He was a problem to ride. And I remember his name was Budweiser. Budweiser was a large, beautiful horse, but he had a mind of his own, and they discouraged people from riding him because he had this habit where during the ride he might suddenly bolt and take off to go back to the barn. And it was a wooded area. At this point in time now today, that location doesn't exist anymore because Miami, Florida has been built up. It's been built up considerably. But at that time, it was a large wooded area, and there was a river, a kind of stream there that was one of the pathways. And I remember I got the opportunity to get onto Budweiser, and I experienced the first time him just taking off and going back. He wouldn't listen to commands, but it had been a safe ride back. I loved Budweiser, and I wanted to get on Budweiser again. And so a few days later, I did get the opportunity. Well, you know, anything that's going wrong at this point in my walk in the faith, I know it involves a principality. So the principalities, I know now, had a different plan. They had a different plan to try to end my life at this camp. And what had happened is that that particular day, I had been wanting so much to go onto a Budweiser. And to tell you the truth, it had been, I had gotten kind of sore saddle riding, but you know what? I just wanted to just have all the opportunity that was available to ride Budweiser. He was a gorgeous big horse. And I loved riding him. I didn't want to ride the other horses. I wanted to ride Budweiser, even though he was unpredictable. So that day, I was just dying to get to be able to have the opportunity to ride him again. And so I got into the Budweiser. I picked him again. He was saddled up just for me, and I got on him, and we started out on a path. Now, it would be one of the leaders would lead us, and we would follow each one person on a horse. Well, and we had gotten to the ride, and all of a sudden, Budweiser decided to bolt back to the barn, as he would do. However, there was a serious problem I encountered as he started bolting back. I mean, Budweiser would run. The person who had put the saddle on had not put it tight. And as he started to run back, I felt the saddle underneath me start to slide to the side. Slide to the side. And I was not an experienced rider. I was 16 years of age. So I wasn't a small person, but, you know, Budweiser ran fast, and there was no stopping him. And the people saw that my saddle was falling, but he outran the people on the horses behind me that we lost him, and he was headed straight for the barn. And this is where this strange thing happened. It's very strange. There's absolutely no accounting for it. I cannot account what happened. But this is what happened. As we were coming up to the barn, and Budweiser was running at full speed. And I had, the saddle beneath me had slipped down. I was sideways. I was on the left side. The saddle itself was sideways on Budweiser, and I was still in the saddle. I didn't know how to dismount. And we were headed right for the barn. And the way he was running, I would hit the barn wall. He was running close to the barn door entrance. And as we were coming up there, I saw inside was 2 or 3 adults who were part of the leaders. And their eyes went wide and their mouths dropped because they saw I was going to hit the barn. And there was no stopping. I guess they were in shock to see one of the children there going to die in front of their face. And however fast the horse can run, he was running very fast. The last thing I remember was coming 3 feet to the wall. That's the last thing I remember. To properly understand the supernatural nature of this, you have to see a trick writer in the same dilemma, in the same situation that I was in. And something close I found was on YouTube, a trick writer. Her name is Emily Peebles. It's not that she has purposely put herself in this situation. She's the closest I found that when she is doing a trick on the horse in a similar position that I found myself in, when positioned at the place I last have any memory of before I have a loss of time, how much time she has to get herself out of it. And this woman, Emily Peebles, she is a skilled trick writer. So here I'm showing the screenshot where I found a spot in one of her performances where she was in a similar position, and then I put the mock-up of the barn gates where I last have conscious recollection before I lost time, lost memory, and the next instant that I had consciousness in was on the opposite side of the barn doors that you see here. I put a mock-up. I was within the barn. I was not crossing into it, but I actually was simply on the other side of that wall where you see these arrows that I made as a trajectory to show where I was and how I was just going to hit that wall, which I'm putting here as a door. Well, the next recollection I have was to be entirely within the barn on the opposite side of the wall. Not that I was on the other side of the horse and in that opening. No, I actually was simply on the other side of the wall, inside completely. And before I get into that, so what I have done here in this recreation, using a trick horse rider who would definitely have the ability, if anybody, to get out of a sticky situation. I put her exactly where I was at my last recollection, and all I'm going to do is simply click play so that you'll see how much time she has, if she was in my situation, to get out of a saddle. And the only option she would have, because see, I put here a mock-up of the frame of the barn, but actually the frame here represents a real barn that was there. So it wasn't open air on either side of the doors. The only open air was the entrance that Budweiser was determined to get through. And so everything else was simply wall. So in order to appreciate the situation and to also be able to determine what could have happened and to see the impossibility of it, just watch Emily and see how much time it takes for her horse, who was going more or less at the speed of Budweiser, because she has this horse going around the ring in a gallop, and while her horse is galloping around, she's doing controlled tricks. Now, the difference between Emily and myself is that Emily is using a saddle built to do stunts on, and the essential part of her saddle is that it is firmly positioned on her horse. Well, my whole problem arose from the fact that whoever put the saddle on Budweiser failed to properly fasten it, or, I have to say this, or the saddle itself was old and worn and maybe the thing slipped out. Either way, it wasn't broken. I know the saddle wasn't broken, or I simply would have fallen out. The saddle was actually still fastened around Budweiser's belly, but it was just as if it was put 2 notches or 3 notches too loose, which maybe that could be the case. I mean, I will never know. All I know, it was just simply too loose to stay upright. And I had ridden him before, and it had been properly put on. Well, whoever put the saddle on, something went wrong. Something went wrong. But anyways, the point is that unlike Emily, I had a saddle that was too loose. So it gave me no foundation to grip or move myself. All I was doing was trying to use the force of my legs to keep myself in that saddle from going any further. So I was 16 years old, and I was slender and fit. So that's where I was using my prime strength. It's because if I let go, I might have smashed my head on the ground as he ran. He might have drugged me, and I had no expertise in any kind of trick riding. But not only that, as you can see, a trick rider still requires a firmly strapped trick saddle in order to move around safely on the horse. So here in this particular picture, Emily Peebles has her leg through a strap that's made for her to suspend herself. And if she was me, she has about the same amount of time when I play this to get herself, she'd have to get herself out of that side position, and she's clinging on, and she's actually has her back against the horse. But I literally was, as I showed here, completely sideways. You know, as it was, you know, just a classic case of the saddle totally going to the left with me in that upright position. So I was completely out, as if I had been upright but totally out to the side. I mean, I had no training or anything how to get myself out. I was just trying to survive, and Budweiser was galloping. And so I'm going to press the play, and you'll see just how much time there is. Well, as you see, it wasn't even a second, not even a second, to go from where Budweiser was positioned, whereas this horse is with his nose is right at the place where the opening the barn door was. And that's where Budweiser was at my last conscious recollection. Now, I had no sensation of losing consciousness. I had no predisposition to faint. I wasn't that kind of person. What simply happened is that from that point on, I have no memory. Time is missing. As you can see, it was less than 1 second. A human being just can't move that fast enough. Even if she had been on the horse I was and had a solidly strapped saddle, and she had found herself at the point I was, she wouldn't have been able to survive either, because there simply wasn't enough time for a human body to react. And to tell you the truth, even though I was sideways on Budweiser all that way, your mind just doesn't fathom that the horse is going to take you right where you smack into the wall. You're not thinking those things. I wasn't thinking about that, but I realized as it became impossible to get out of, that Budweiser was going to be almost brushing his shoulder to the barn entrance. He wasn't thinking about me. He wasn't having any idea about me. You know, some animals can be sensitive. They can be aware, but not this horse. Budweiser wanted to just go where he was going, irrespective of me and my dilemma. He wasn't having any kind of recognition of that if he did that, he was going to cause serious, deadly damage to his human rider. And I don't know what would have happened to him. So this is where time stopped for me and where there's a gap missing. And there aren't answers that can satisfy what happened because, as I said, my next recollection is being entirely on the opposite side of the wall I was going to hit. But not only opposite side, not immediately opposite, but a full body length inside of the horse and my leading him. The next thing, it was like we were positioned, Budweiser and I. That was our starting position of our earth consciousness from that point on. Because what actually had to transpire had to be something that took several minutes. Because you see how the horse was running. You see even the trick horse, how quick it was for him to run past that point where the nose of the horse is. And you see the speed. Well, you know what? The position that I found myself in with Budweiser, besides the fact there's no explanation, how I went through the wall without breaking the wall and without having any kind of motion to get through the wall, but I was not only through the wall and on the other side of the wall, because if it was a linear action, I could have rammed through the wall, and then I would have been through the wall, because there's nothing to explain how I got through the wall in the first place. There's nothing to explain how I got off the horse whatsoever. But not only that, how I did it in the next second. Not only did I have to get off the horse, extricate myself out of something I couldn't get out of a loose saddle that I couldn't even let go of, but I also had to get down, get Budweiser's reins, put them over his head, and get in front of him, and he would have had to cooperate himself. Because we're dealing with a horse that weighs anywhere between 1,000 pounds to 1,200 pounds. He was, I believe he was an American quarter horse as far as the way he looked. I'm not 100% positive, but that's a common horse around here. And you have to take into consideration that weight and that he was galloping at not the fastest he could run, but he was doing a good gallop, and horses can run, I think, if I look up here Wikipedia, 44 miles per hour. So he probably was going at least minimally 25. And so here he was, he had been going the long distance, and here he had been running a distance already, at least about a block, at a fast gallop. I was sideways on him, and he was still at this gallop as he came that close to the barn opening. So between his weight and speed, he couldn't stop on a dime. From that weight and speed, the momentum that would have happened on my body, if he had been able to stop even suddenly, there's a law of physics where I, myself, having nothing to stop myself, would have been thrown forward. And I would have been thrown forward with a lot of violence because he was also going fast at the time. So there was no way out of it. I'm adding all these little facts so you can have a complete understanding. There was no way out of the situation without my escaping serious injury, because of the proximity and the speed. Simply, there was absolutely no way afforded to me I would escape horrific harm, most likely the end of my life, because of the horse's speed, the laws of physics. Even if the horse had been able to stop, the momentum would have thrown me forward, and quite fast at such a short distance, only a foot and a half. I would have slammed into that barn even if he had stopped, because that's one of the laws of Newton, where if you have nothing to stop you when a large force stops, you're going to be propelled forward, and that's why we have seat belts in our car. And you see the crash dummies and crash dummies getting thrown forward when a car hits something going at a fast speed. And that's the scenario I was in. And so I can see why reality had to break. There was no turning back any kind of save at that point. It had to be a miracle. And so this could be why I experienced a miracle with no answers, and this supernatural thing took place, because if God had a plan for me, reality had to be broken, and a paranormal fix, a supernatural fix, was the only thing that would work at that point. My next consciousness and recollection with Budweiser was we were both completely inside the barn, inside the entrance, and he was not running. He was stopped. And I was in front of him. I was not just in front of him, I was on the side that I had been, where I was sideways, but I also had the rein in my hands, in my right hand, and I was leading him. I was the length of the reins in a leadership position to him. And he was calm, and I was calm. And that's where take two happened to my life and Budweiser's life. So if I want to show you here, to appreciate, to understand the impossibility of it, we have to watch here a young horse running at the speed that Budweiser was running, and doing its best to do a quick halt. Well, you see the horse is sliding here just from the momentum. And I already talked about what would happen to my body from the momentum, the laws of Newton, if he had stopped. But all the same, I'm showing now, let's take me out of the picture, if Budweiser had decided right there, a foot before the entrance to the barn, to halt, and he had been running, like I said, minimally 25. He was in a real gallop. He wasn't in a casual gallop. Like these two girls who were running together on the road. He was in a real gallop. All the way as we were at the barn. He didn't relent from this run, even as he approached inside the barn doors. Well, if he had had the mind to just stop right there, from his speed, he still would have taken a few feet to really come to a halt. That's with me not even on him. But you see, I was on him. But I just want to address the impossibility of where I found myself with him inside. Just taking me out of the equation. As I show here, I did my best to show by this mock-up that I was in front of Budweiser, and Budweiser was behind me, as if we had had a casual walk, and we just stepped fully inside the barn, and I was in front of him, holding his harness in my right hand, and he was behind me, by himself completely in the barn. Probably you could say about a foot or so, his hind end was totally in the barn. But that was impossible. It was entirely impossible that he would, even if I was not on him, been able to come to a total stop right there at such a speed and be completely calm. And I'm holding the reins in front of him. Well, that's another bizarreness. So we both were, the only way this would have happened, going along science, is we had to have been put there like for a role, a play, set up in these positions, take two. That's the only way, because in reality, in the laws of science, we wouldn't be there. Even if I was not part of the scene, that Budweiser would have stopped perfectly one body length inside and be completely calm like that, and there's no hoof marks in the ground of his having to halt himself at that speed, and there's no jolting, and the loose saddle didn't come off, and all these things that should have taken place. Let's just erase that, and let's just say just for himself to come from about 25 to 30 mile an hour run a foot before the entrance of the barn and just halt perfectly a body length inside, that's not physically possible without all kinds of things taking place, including digging into the ground like this horse did. So, and he could have also flipped himself over. Nothing. In fact, there was just no evidence of any kind of stop of that nature, but an evidence of a casual placement within the barn of the horse and myself, ready for the director to say, "Action! Start the film of Vivian's life again." I believe there's 3 adults belonging to Circle C who were standing there towards the back of the barn, and they were aghast watching me, because as you can see, there was just absolutely no way I was going to miss it. Maybe we all had time removed from us, because when I was there, when I came to consciousness, I was in that position inside the barn. And then when I came to awareness, that's when the adults who I'd seen outside the barn with this look of horror on their face, that's when they spoke to me. And they said to me in kind of a quiet, hushed voice, "We thought you were a goner, kid." So they didn't speak to me until the moment I had awareness. From the time I was sure I wasn't going to live, to the time I mysteriously and inexplicably found myself inside. And when reality began again for me, then they said, these adults, "We thought you were a goner, kid." So it's possible their own time has missing gaps too. Because what did they say? Wow, that was amazing. Wow, how'd you do that? No. What they said to me was when they saw me next in front of them, without any explanation how I just appeared there in front of them in that position, "We thought you were a goner, kid." They didn't tell me how wonderful it was I got myself out, how it happened, because there was no explanation. I was before them coming sideways, sure to hit the barn. And the next thing, when they talk to me next, I'm in front of them, fully inside the barn, holding the reins of the horse. To this day, that's almost 40 years ago, I have no recollection of what happened. I never got any kind of flashbacks. I never got any kind of dream, because, and apparently when God wants you to live and things have gotten amiss to his plans, this is simply erased from you. There is a being who has complete control to the point he can make what we know behave in ways we can't explain.